Are we on?
Capital TV.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to House Labor. It's Wednesday, March 27, 2024. We have 9 bills on the agenda to be heard, and I'd like the clerk to take the roll.
Chairman Corvisi.
Here.
First Vice Chair Messier. Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Here.
Representative Brian. Representative Cardillo.
Here.
Representative Casey. Representative Edwards.
Here.
Representative Falella.
Here.
Representative Fenton Fung.
Present.
Representative Henrys. Representative McEntee.
Here.
Representative McNamara.
Here.
Representative Nardone. Representative Perez. Representative Potter.
Present.
We have 11 members present, Chairman. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before we begin, I would like to take the opportunity to just recognize the return of our legal counsel, Fred Marzilli, after a slight hiatus. Fred, we're glad to have you back, and I'm sure the committee will utilize your services, and I'm sure we'll be arguing by the end of the committee meeting. Before I ask for a bill to hold the 9 bills for, before I ask for a motion to hold the 9 bills for further study, I'd like to read something that we do in every committee to let the individuals here attending and the public know what we do when we hold a bill for further study. So before the committee starts hearing testimony on the bills on today's agenda, I'm going to ask for a motion to hold the bills for further study. I'd like to remind the committee that a vote in favor of holding all bills for further study is not substantive and does not signify any position on the merits of the bills. This motion is procedural only and simply allows the committee sufficient time to review both verbal and written testimony and to organize the hearing process. In addition, all letters which have been submitted prior to the hearing to this committee in support and in opposition are all online and may be viewed by the public. Hence, they will not be read. At this time, I will entertain a motion to hold for further study the following bills: 7172, 7531, 7532, 7579, 7788, 7791, 7837, 7883, and 8059. By Floor Manager Edwards, seconded by Second Vice Chair Alzate and Representative Potters and McAtee. I would like a roll.
Chairman Corvisi.
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Yes.
Representative Cardillo.
Yes.
Representative Falella.
Yes.
Representative Edwards.
Aye.
Representative Fenton Fung.
Yes.
Representative McEntee.
Yes.
Representative McNamara.
Yes.
Representative Nardone. And Representative Potter.
Yes.
All in favor, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. First bill we're going to hear is 7532 by Representative Felix. And this would allow individuals employed in domestic service or in and about a private home to be included as an employee for purposes of minimum wage laws. We have 3 people signed up to testify. I'd like to start with George Nee from the AFL-CIO, who's in favor of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On behalf of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, we strongly support this legislation by Representative Felix. This bill would provide that the Rhode Island minimum wage would apply to domestic workers. Presently, domestic workers are covered under the federal minimum wage, and those definitions and anything describing them are covered in that manner. However, as you know, the difference between the federal minimum wage of $7.25 and the $14 minimum wage in Rhode Island is significant. This is an injustice that happened many, many years ago as a result of the passage of the minimum wage law under the Roosevelt administration. A lot of groups were excluded, including domestic workers. This bill would provide coverage of the minimum wage to approximately 1,000 workers in Rhode Island. It would deal with this injustice, and it was also by the House last year. So for all of those reasons, we would urge you to support it again. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, George. Any questions of the witness? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nina Harrison from the Economic Progress Institute. Is Nina here? No? Well, she did sign up to speak, and she's in favor. And we have Steve Brown from the ACLU, who's welcome, Stephen, to House Labor.
Thank you very much, Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Brown on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island, also here to express our strong support for this legislation. This has a rather sordid history at the federal level. You heard from Mr. Nee talking about the exemptions that took place back during the Roosevelt era. A number of the exemptions were put in for discriminatory reasons, to be honest. And unfortunately, that discrimination still exists today. The largest percentage of people we are talking about in this trade are not only people of color, but women, who make up the vast majority of domestic workers. And this is an opportunity for the General Assembly to set things right, treat domestic workers the same as just about any other worker in the workplace. They are doing work in the home that the same workers outside the home get paid minimum wage. So just as a matter of fairness and equity, we hope that you will again pass this bill. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of the witness? Representative Nardone.
This bill, it only includes monetary wages, correct? And the reason why I ask that, because some people, domestic, I don't know, call them housekeepers or people who work, sometimes they get free shelter and they're able to live there for nothing. So this would just be monetary, right? So that wouldn't constitute a wage if someone was living there for free.
No, this has to do with the actual wage.
It just has to do with the
monetary
wages.
paid, yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
We also had some individuals who signed in favor of the bill but did not want to speak. Well, Nina Harrison did, but is she here? She is. Oh, you are?
No, Nina Harrison. Oh,
Are you Nina Harrison?
no. Oh, she's Haney Maldonado.
Okay, she didn't write down whether she wanted to speak or not. Would you like to speak? Come forward. Certainly. There was a little confusion. You didn't mark which box to whether you wanted to speak or not, so. But you're more than welcome. Welcome to House Labor. I assume Nina is not here. Okay. All right. Have a seat.
Thank you. Okay, dear honorable member of the labor community, my name is Haney Maldonado. I'm executive director and co-founder of Fuerza Laboral, DACES Workers Center and Worker Owner Co-op's business incubator in Central Falls that was founded 18 years ago to create solutions to the problem of wage theft and workers injustice in Rhode Island. I'm here today to speak from my organization's extensive experience with workers facing injustice situation in support of the Bill 7532. I want to ask to start by considering the following scenario. Imagine a workplace where there are no adults beside the employers and the employees. No customer, no health, no fire inspector, no board of director or shareholder to ask questions. No sign to identify the workplace as shut. The entire employer-employee relationship exists behind closed door. A lack of transparency and accountability create ideal conditions for abuse because the power differential is so great. One ever know what happened, and not to the worker whose housing is depend in the employer and has a situation where losing one job also means become homeless. This is the situation facing many domestic workers today. At Fuerza Laboral, we provide labor right orientation for for workers who are facing difficult situations and discuss with them the various agencies that can help and what their potential options are getting adjusted. The past fall, we had an older single woman come in to see us who was looking to go to bed us her bills. She told us about the job she was offered by family she has no relation to. The conditions were caring for 5 young children, getting 2 older ones of school, while caring for a baby and toddlers, cooking a meal from breakfast, close dinners, to whole family, and cleaning the house. That is the situation. She was to arrive at the house by 6 a.m., but has no specific end time. For this, she was to be paid only $250 per week, even if she only working 40 hours a week, which would have impossible that the workload she has made only $6.25 an hour. What work is more important than caring for a child? Yet, the work primarily carried out by women, especially women of color, has been so devalued by society that the family thought it was doing her a favor to give her some spare change to do something they thought an older woman should be grateful to do anyway. We have submitted writing testimonial from 2 older domestic workers to the community that help further paint the picture how to the industry of domestic work operate in Rhode Island. I hope you will read them and learn from their brave testimony. Our neighborhood in Massachusetts and Connecticut have both passed laws to encourage minimum wage and overtime protection for domestic workers. Now it's in Rhode Island turn to insurance to workers doing the most sacred and important work are available to have the most basic protection under the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Haney, gracias por su testimonio. Thank you for your testimony. Last year, the House passed this bill. We had great discussion about it, and happy to support this bill. It's super important. Gracias por lo que usted nos estaba diciendo. Súper importante escuchar el testimonio de la gente que de verdad está trabajando en esas condiciones. So, I just wanted to let her know that they did have we do have written testimony from domestic workers who are facing some of this discrimination and not being paid a livable wage for their work. So, thank you.
Especially in this, in our community, our workers that are invisible.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big problem.
Absolutely.
And that is constant.
Yep.
So if they have submitted letters, then they'll be online.
Yes.
Am I correct, Mr.
Yes.
Clerk? Thank you.
I have the
Gracias.
testimony.
Yep, you can give it to the clerk. Gracias.
Nina Harrison, we were looking for you.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I was upstairs waiting for House Judiciary. My name is Nina Harrison. I am the Policy Director at the Economic Progress Institute, and we are here in support of the bill to ensure that domestic workers get paid the minimum wage. This is an equity issue. Passing this bill would increase equity for the state of Rhode Island because domestic workers are disproportionately women of color and people of color, and also immigrants. Ensuring that these people are not able to be exploited for their labor, especially when they are often in power dynamics where they're at a severe disadvantage in terms of maybe having access to a lawyer or access and knowledge of the law and being able to enforce the law. So passing this is incredibly important, would increase equity, and also, as you all are likely well aware, the history of excluding domestic workers and other types of workers like servers from minimum wage protections is really a history of discrimination, because historically the people who have done those jobs are women who have been experiencing gender pay inequality for many years in America, and also people of color are the predominant people who do domestic labor and these other jobs that haven't been given minimum wage protections. So I want to thank you all for passing this out of committee last year. I hope that you will do it again, and EPI urges passage.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Thank you, Nina. The only other person who signed up but did not wish to speak in favor of this bill is Alex Moore from SEIU. And that concludes testimony on 7532. We are going to jump to a bill that I sponsored, 7837, regarding workers' compensation. It amends the current law on workers' compensation to require any person who is considered an independent contractor to file annually with the Director of Labor and Training, and removes the requirement that the form be in writing. We passed this bill last year after a great deal of discussion, and apparently we need to tweak it, which is not unusual for bills that have been passed 1 year and tweaked in the next. So I'm going to ask George Nee from the AFL-CIO to come up and discuss the bill. George, welcome again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I also serve as the chair of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council, which your chairman also serves on. This bill was passed last year, and as a result, it was reviewed by a committee that we have at the Workers' Comp Advisory Council, and they determined that there were a few changes that needed to be made. So that's exactly the way the chairman described it. I want to make sure that people know that they have to file this report annually, and also it corrects where the information of who the independent contractors are sent to by the Department of Labor and Training. So it's just a minor changes or technical changes to the bill you passed last year.
Thank you, George. And in addition, Judge Ferreira also sent a bill.
A letter of support on this based on the review that they did at the court with the lawyers at the court.
And delineating the details of the bill that had to be
That's
corrected.
correct, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions of the witness? Representative Nardone.
I do remember this piece of legislation on the floor, and could you remind me, why is this bill necessary?
There is an ongoing discussion in our community as to who are independent contractors and who are employees, because it makes a significant difference. 20 years ago, in one of the workers' comp reform efforts, it was that independent contractors would have to file with the Department of Labor and Training that they were an independent contractor. It was determined after time that that really was ineffective, because once you filed once 20 years ago, you never had to do it again. So after much discussion at the Workers' Comp Advisory Council and with all of the parties that were involved in the wage step discussion, it was determined that it would be a much better situation if people who claimed that they were independent contractors, which there are plenty of them, and it's fine to be one, they just would have to file annually with the Department of Labor and Training, and that list would be given to the Department of Revenue every year so they could cross-check it.
This just to show that they're in compliance with workman comp? Is that what the necessity is of
Well,
it?
yeah, obviously, if they are claiming and legitimately are an independent contractor, they're not covered under workers' comp. Unfortunately, we have a lot of situations in our economy where employers tell people they're independent contractors and therefore try to absolve themselves from workers' comp, minimum wage, and other things. So this is a way of having a check and balance on that system.
And those employees are 1099 employees that are claiming?
If you're an independent contractor, you would get a 1099, correct?
Right, so they're not getting a W-2, so that would indicate that they're not employees.
Well, if they're getting a W-2, they're an employees. We have situations where we have people are being classified as independent contractors by employers incorrectly.
Those that are being classified, so they're getting W-2s, is what you're telling me, but they're
They're
classified
not
as
even getting
independent
that. Sometimes they're
contractors?
paid under the table.
Yeah, 'cause this is a lot of, it's more proper and procedure for small businesses and independent contractors. That would be my objection to it.
Well, actually, It's been in effect for all those years, and it's been in effect starting this January, and we haven't had those complaints, at least that I've been brought to my attention by the Department of Labor and Training. It's going very smoothly.
I had several people reach out to me in opposition to it after the bill went through the House, people in the small business community. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the witness? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bob Goldberg from the Providence Chamber, who will be talking in opposition to the bill. Bob? Welcome to House Labor.
You know?
I do.
Thank you.
How, I really do. How long have I known you, Bob?
Many moons.
All right.
Bob Goldberg here this afternoon on 7837 on behalf of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. And certainly we object to this legislation for a couple of reasons. One, it's the paperwork in running a business has become overwhelming. It makes no sense to have the individual file in every single job that he does, as opposed to registering one time, once a year, that's not a problem, with the Department of Labor that they're an independent contractor. It should be easy enough to check and verify for anybody that's interested. Now, my predecessor here, Mr. Nee, talked a little bit about the legislation from last year, the year before, went on for a while, the debate concerning wage theft and misclassification, et cetera, et cetera. I would suggest to you that this is a backdoor way around some of the compromises that were made in that legislation. In that legislation, it was determined, and everybody agreed, that the Fair Labor Standards Act would be the guidepost for who's an independent contractor and who isn't. And that was a simple test. That was a hard-fought battle, but eventually everybody came to agreement through the assistance of your staff and the leadership in this General Assembly. Now, this is a catch-all. If you forget and miss, all of a sudden you're in the other category. There should be at least some provision for the poor individual that forgets to register for one of the many jobs that he's doing or during the course of a year, and give him a grace period after a warning to register so that he doesn't automatically get dumped into the other class with all the burdens and problems contained therein. And for those reasons and the paperwork, it's interesting, I don't see Department of Labor here crying for this bill and we need it, we need it. For those reasons, on behalf of the Chamber, I'm here to object to this bill.
Thank you, Bob. Before I turn it over to the rest of the committee, just one point of clarification. When you said it felt that the legislation was an end run, are you talking about the original legislation that was passed last year or the language we have before us now?
I'm talking about the process of, by default, if you don't register for every single job you're doing as an independent contractor, by default, you're put in and become an employee, which is the crux of this legislation. That's the end run around. Forget about the Fair Labor Standards Act test, forget about all the other criteria in the legislation, the lengthy legislation that all agreed to a year ago. And like I say,
Are you
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, just trying to wrap my mind around it. Are you saying that the filing by the independent contractor has to be an individual filing for each position?
Yes, that's what the bill says. It says it on page 1, line 9, for each hiring entity that retains their services. And that is
Well, I'm
endless
wondering if it
paperwork.
means if they have to file separately for each entity or file once and name all the entities. That would be a difference.
That would be a difference, but the way I interpret this, and a fair reading is, file every single time they get a new job. And that should be clarified, and frankly, Mr. Chairman, that would be probably a good concession to resolve this dispute.
But it was never, and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot here, but it was my understanding that there would be one filing and it would be all the individual entities that individual represented.
That's a great improvement over the way I read this bill.
Well, I'm sure that we've taken this bill under further study, and I'm sure that we will discuss that in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions of the witness? Thank you, Bob. And we only had one other individual who signed up in favor but is not speaking, is Greg Mancini from Build, Rhode Island. That ends the hearing on 7837. Next up, we have Representative Giraldo's bill, 7791, regarding minority business enterprise, requires the Department of Administration to provide a list of certified minority and women-owned business enterprises to each prospective contractor of a construction project. Representative Giraldo, welcome to House Labor. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for having me here to discuss House Bill 7791. In simple terms, this bill makes contractors seeking state funds demonstrate that they are actually making a good faith effort to secure the services of the 10% requirement of including minority and women businesses before they are granted a waiver, relieving them of that responsibility. Right now, there are no legal requirements of contractors to show evidence of trying to secure those types of contractors before seeking a waiver. And this bill seeks to change that by requiring that they are provided by DOA a specific list of eligible contractors. There's hundreds of contractors listed on the website, and this is just a step to make sure that they are making that good faith effort and receive some level of assistance from the Department of Administration. It also creates a paper trail of the waivers that are granted. And that's it. It does those two things. This bill stems from the disparity study that the state paid a lot of money for back in 2021 as we explored what was our utilization rate, what were the trends, and that disparity study showed that Rhode Island has a long way to go in just meeting our 10% threshold. The report identified disparities in pretty much every single project category that they measured: construction, goods and services, and recommended this as one of the remedies to get us where we need to be. They had a list of several recommendations. This was a pretty straightforward and easy one that says, before you give a waiver, make sure that they actually have looked at the list and have been provided a list and received some level of assistance from DOA. As we all know, the entrepreneurial activity of minority-owned and women-owned businesses are vital for a healthy economy, and I ask that you make this simple and important change to show that we actually support them. Minorities are rapidly increasing their presence and influence in the economy, but Rhode Island's contract compliance comes in at a D+, and we did not meet our 10% threshold. That's our goal. We set the state law that we'd have 10% of those contracts going to WMBEs, and out of the 6-year span that was studied, we only met the goal 4 times. We did not meet the goal 4 out of the 6 years that the disparity study looked at. So put bluntly, this bill ensures that there's no easy way out. Thank you, and I urge passage of this bill.
Any questions of the witness? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
There's only one person signed up in support of this bill who is not speaking. That's Gregory Mancini from Build, Rhode Island. That would end testimony on 7791.
Mr. Chairman, can I be recorded in the affirmative?
I was just about to say, Representative
My votes,
Casey and
thank you.
Second Vice Chair Messio, would you like your votes to be counted? Would you like your vote, attendance and vote for further study to be counted?
Yes.
Please.
Let the clerk so move. Okay. Next, we are going to move to 7531 by Representative Felix. An act relating to labor and labor relations minimum wages. Commencing on 1/1/25, gradually increases the minimum wage for employees receiving gratuities from the current $3.89 to $14.95 by 1/1/29, and on 1/1/30, the minimum wage shall be no less than the minimum wage established by the minimum wage law. So we have a number of individuals who will be testifying on this. I don't see Representative Felix here. So we will start with Christopher Carlozzi. And you are representing what organization?
I'm with the National Federation of Independent Business. Before I start,
Welcome to House Labor.
do you mind if I threw my other testimony on the other minimum wage and get them both done at the same time, if I could do it quickly?
Why don't you proceed with the bill before us, and then you can do that at the end?
Certainly.
And before you begin your testimony, Mr. Carlozzi, let me just say this. We have a number of people who wish to speak, and you'll all get an opportunity.
I will keep it quick.
I'm not talking to you. I was talking to the audience. Everyone will get an opportunity to speak. I'm not going to start the clock, which we usually do if we have a multitude of individuals. I would just respectfully ask that you remember that other people have to speak. Try not to be repetitive. Try not to repeat testimony someone's already said, but please give us your opinions. Give us your perspective and opinions on the bill, because we are more than willing to listen. Mr. Carlozzi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. We at the National Federation...
Chris, could you just make sure your button is up.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you to the committee. My name is Christopher Carlozzi. I'm the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business. We represent small businesses all across the state in a wide range of industries, including service, hospitality, retail, wholesale, agriculture, manufacturing. And we are in full opposition to the legislation before you, phasing out the tipped wage. Hospitality is a key industry in this state, yet House Bill number 7531 seeks to eliminate the tipped wage. There's no industry harder hit by the pandemic. Phasing out the tipped wage is bad for two reasons: the impact on smaller businesses, but also the impact on servers. Others have attempted this policy change, and it backfired. Maine set to phase it out following a ballot referendum, but promptly reversed it. And it wasn't because of employers, it was because the servers experienced a reduction in pay. Tips decreased and servers showed up in full force at the Maine State House, demanding the tipped wage be reinstated. So that is my testimony on that, Mr. Chairman. I keep it as brief as possible for you.
That was perfect model testimony. You wish to speak on another bill. Which one?
Just on the minimum wage in general, the increase to $20 an hour, $75.79. I'm happy to come back up after everyone else.
If you can be brief, even though that bill is not in play, go ahead.
Appreciate it. We've not yet seen the effects of the current minimum wage increase. The final tier to $15 has yet to come, but we're charting a path to $20 an hour, and even worse, indexing it to inflation. No state has passed a $20 per hour minimum wage, but to provide a current and very recent example of a $20 minimum wage and its impact, we should look at California, where fast food chains will see a $20 per hour minimum wage going into effect next week. On March 25th, the Wall Street Journal reported California restaurants, mainly pizzerias, outlined plans to cut jobs, reduce hours before the April 1st wage hike to $20. The story states Pizza Hut laid off more than 1,200 drivers in preparation for the hike. Round Table Pizza laid off 1,280, Excalibur Pizza 21% of their workforce. Others have reported raising menu prices or on consumers and reducing hours for staff, even noted hiring freezes. The outcome will be no different for Rhode Island. We've shown that month after month in our optimism index that we do, business owners are raising compensation now, but it's also resulting in higher costs for consumers. In fact, 21% just this month said they had to raise prices on consumers because of rising costs. As I said, I will keep it very brief. I appreciate the time and certainly entertain any questions on either proposal.
Any questions of the witness? Representative Nardone.
Got one question. You mentioned California. Didn't they exempt Panera Bread from that?
They did not in the end. They ended up having to include them. But, that's our concern, that when you raise something so quickly, and I mean, we're talking about big chains here. I represent small businesses, so I can't imagine what the impact would be on a business that doesn't have multiple locations, that can't spread that kind of labor cost increase out over multiple states, which may be lower cost states. So once you get to $20 an hour for a small business, you're talking about the same sorts of circumstances where menu prices are going to rise, or they're going to reduce hours, or unfortunately jobs.
Right, so Panera Bread was, that they backed off, because the Panera Bread gave the governor a large donation, I believe.
There was some sort of
Yes,
scenario I
yeah.
remember seeing in the news,
Thanks.
but I think it did apply to them in the end. Thank you.
Any other questions of the witness? Chris, we really appreciate your testimony, and thank you. You were right on point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, we're going to take Bill Walsh from the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. Bill, welcome to House Labor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bill Walsh here on behalf of Rhode Island Hospitality Association in opposition to H7531. It's sad to say, unfortunately, not much has changed in the challenges confronting the hospitality industry in the years since we've discussed this issue. Some have gotten worse, and then there's new challenges. I won't discuss the bridge. But the fact of the matter is, eliminating the tip minimum wage still threatens to push hospitality businesses over the economic cliff. I'll be brief, as you're going to hear from owners, operators, and servers. Some are speaking, some are present just to register their opposition, and many have submitted written testimony in opposition. But the key facts to focus on here are no tip worker makes less than the actual minimum wage. Businesses make up for any shortfalls that fall below. The National Restaurant Association has done a study in Rhode Island that the median tipped worker in Rhode Island makes approximately $29 an hour, which is more than double our $14 minimum wage, and many make a lot more. That's the median. So as you heard last year, and sorry to steal some of Bill's thunder here, this bill is a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist. And so for these reasons, we ask you once again to oppose the bill.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions of the witness? Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Thank you for this. I don't really have a question or anything, but so I'm on the bill, and I support the idea because I think, talking with my colleagues on this bill, it's more about making sure that it's really highlighted that, so full disclosure, I'm a server, and so I support the idea behind making sure that employees are paid well, right? I think everybody here can agree on that. So I support that. We want to make sure that restaurant owners and many of the ones that I have worked in have been great. We do fall into the category sometimes about like it's easy to not be able to pay them, right? And so I think that that's a lot of the intent. However, to your point, it's really hard because cash on demand is great, and we sometimes do make a lot more money than the hourly wage. And so this is just like one of those really funky bills for me. I support the idea behind it. We want to make sure that all employees are getting paid a livable wage, especially in the restaurant industry. However, if you're not someone that has worked in this industry, you're not really understanding that you are actually getting paid really well. But we just want to make sure that people are not being abused. I think that that's the main idea behind why this bill keeps coming up every year. And so while I've been very fortunate enough to work in spaces and places where that has not happened, that's not to say that it has not happened to others. So this is just like one of those really tough bills, because I understand the intent with Rep. Felix behind this and some of my other colleagues who are supportive of this. However, if I need to make some extra cash, I will never shy away from going back to being a bartender and server, banquet server too. So I appreciate your testimony on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for both your service here as well as in the industry.
Any questions of the witness? Bill, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now call up Rebecca Paxton from Employment Policies Institute, Bill Kitsillis from Angelo's Palace Pizza, and Sarah Wilkins from Chomp Kitchen. I can't read that last word. What is it? Warren. Okay. We will take Rebecca first.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Paxton. I am the research director at the Employment Policies Institute. We study bills like this all over the country at the state level, at the local level. We've also looked at it at the federal level. You're going to hear from a lot of folks on how this is going to affect your servers and bartenders and your favorite restaurants in Rhode Island. I'm here to kind of shed a little light about what this is doing across the country already as sort of a cautionary tale. So, decades of economic research have showed that this kind of creates a crisis for not only employees, but also restaurants and also customers. The economics of this bill don't add up. Employees lose their jobs, tips decrease for employees, remaining employees are taking home less overall, and restaurants are forced to close. It's a lose-lose-lose for the entire industry. We don't have to speculate on what would happen here in Rhode Island because it's already playing out right now in Washington, D.C., where I currently live. DC restaurants have closed at the highest rate in 2023 since the pandemic. A similar bill just went into effect in May. It hasn't even been in effect for a full year. And we're already seeing restaurants not only close down, but also decide to move out of the district into neighboring states and business markets. There was a headline in the news just this week that the DC full-service restaurant workforce has now shrunk by 12% since May 2023 as a result of this policy. It's not because restaurants are greedy, it's because they're just trying to make the numbers work. They're trying to keep some folks on their payroll, some folks able to earn tips, but the numbers just aren't adding up. More restaurants have scrambled to adopt what we call automatic service charges, so a 20% fee at the bottom of a check that goes to the house. The restaurants are able to distribute that to employees if they can, but a lot of times they're just trying to make up those raised that they're mandated instead of tips. So employees are seeing maybe a byline on their check, but they're not receiving the same amount of tips that they normally would because customers are now confused, they're frustrated, and it puts customers at the forefront of that business transaction when before they were able to take home tips from their regular customers. Like I said, overall what we're seeing in the news is employees are saying that they are taking home less money, whether they're earning money from the service charges or not, or they've been laid off, or they're getting fewer hours from their employers. Employees are reporting lower tips and less take-home pay. Overall, the Restaurant Association in Washington, D.C. also did a survey of employers and diners. Employers are saying they're increasingly moving out of the district, and diners are saying it's just too expensive to eat out now. They're confused about whether or not to tip, so they don't want to offend anyone, so they're just not going to go out to dinner as much. A survey conducted by my organization had surveyed these restaurants beforehand who were saying they were afraid of these consequences. They didn't want to have to make these choices for their employees and their restaurants, but ultimately we're seeing the effects play out in real time. So this is not just sort of fear-stoking ahead of a new bill. This is something that is playing out in real time and is something that's been playing out across the country for several years. Economists from Miami University and Trinity University estimate that for Rhode Island, this could kill up to 1,900 jobs in the Rhode Island restaurant sector and kill almost $10 million in lost earnings for employees because of the reduced tips. So at the Employment Policies Institute, we would urge to reject this bill.
Representative McAtee, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. So the employees don't like it, and the employers don't like it. Who likes it? Because honestly, I've gotten a lot of emails. I haven't gotten one from anybody saying, we want this bill. Everybody is like, no, we don't want this bill. So I just don't even know where this comes from. And as you know, and everybody in this room knows, if a waiter, waitress, bartender doesn't make minimum wage with his or her tips, then the employer is responsible to fill that gap, to make sure that they're paid minimum wage. So I don't understand where this bill comes from every year, but it does, and I will continue to not support it. So I just wanted to say that because I don't see the benefit. I haven't heard any testimony that there's a benefit to this. So thank you for your testimony. It really wasn't a question, I guess. Well, it was, because I was like, who likes it? And you don't know anybody who does either, so thank you.
Any questions of the witness? Okay, thank you. Mr. Kitsilis, did I say that correctly?
Did it right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay,
After a couple years in a row, right?
all right.
So hopefully we don't have to come here to testify. But my parents opened up Angel's Palace Pizza in Cumberland, Rhode Island in 1978. And I own it today with it was a while ago, my mom and sister. And we love it. We employ around 90 employees between servers, cooks, delivery drivers, cashiers, hosts, bussers. And it's been a lifelong passion of ours, and we take a lot of pride in it. And all I have to say is this. I brought two servers here with me today, Nicole and Candace. Candace. So Nicole and Candace are moms with 4 kids apiece, maybe 5, I don't know, 4. They show. And Nicole works about 8 to 10 hours a week at my restaurant and averages about $35 to $40 an hour just in the tips, not in the base wage. Candace, I just confirmed because I works about 35 to 40 hours and averages $40 to $50, between $800 and $1,000 a week. And what happens is that the tip model, like I've said this in the past, the servers are aligned with the business interests of the owners. Think about it. You make a percentage of the sales. The better you are taking care of the guests, providing service, making sure that guest feels like they're part of the you do. And the better the restaurant does, because now we get a repeat. You all have regulars. We all know how that works. So they do really, really well. And I just want to point out from the business standpoint, for each $1 that goes up in the tip wage in my restaurant, I have $700 a week in tip wage. That's $700 to us, plus the employment taxes on it, plus the workers' compensation hit on that. It comes out to about $35,000 to $42,000 a year hit on that in the tip wage. An increase to full minimum wage like this, you're talking a real substantial number. And the price increase to offset that, which we've already seen elevated price increases over the last 4 years because of COVID and inflation, real hit on the consumer. And in fact, a lot of restaurants, we're struggling to make sure we get people in the dining room because of that elevated cost. People are coming out a little less often, maybe not ordering a dessert or whatnot. So there's a lot of compression at the top with price increases, and there's only so much I think the consumer right now and people in the state of Rhode Island are willing to pay at a certain point. So raising prices doesn't solve all the issues. So it's a double-edged sword there. With that said, I mean, Billy stole my line. I think we're in search of a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. And I understand the sentiment behind what Vice Chair Alante said about higher wages. The wages by staying competitive, and I think this model works wonders. If you start adding service fees to checks, which is what owners are going to have to do to offset this labor cost, you're going to see a decrease in tips. And as the studies have bared out in DC and elsewhere, servers actually end up making less. And that's why I'm against the bill, and thanks for having me.
Any questions of the witness? Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you for having me here today, and I think what I'm about to share with you is reiterated and will be probably shared with other people. I'm here today on behalf of CHOMP and Sam Glynn to share my story. I started waitressing in my teens and 20s on the Cape during the summers, and for the money that I was able to earn through great service and hospitality in 3 short months sustained me for 9 months in my scholastic year in college, meaning that I earned enough in 3 months to carry me through the school year. The love I have for waitressing and hospitality has always stayed with me. It helped inspire my career in talent acquisition for the last 30 years. I'm still in the service of others. So when IBM laid me and 8,000 of my colleagues off last year, I decided to go back to waitressing knowing I would earn more in tips than I would on unemployment. And while I'm not making a 6-figure salary, I am earning enough through tips to afford my rent, utilities, and other basic essentials. Tips motivate me to be the very best at what I do. Great service equals great tips, and tips are what I live on. My livelihood depends on it.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you. The next 3 people I'm going to call up: Bob Bacon from Greg's Restaurant, Evie Ionowitz from Chomp Kitchen Providence, and Scott Kermick from Diego's. Did I say that correctly? What is it? Kermel. Okay. Kermel. Okay. We will take Mr. Bacon first. Welcome to House Labor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll keep it brief because the points are similar to what previously said. I'm going to try to make it more specific to a Rhode Island restaurant chain that I hope that most of you are familiar with. Feels a little like Groundhog Day because it was last March at this time we were talking about the same thing. And a lot of things haven't changed. One of them is this still would cost Greg's over $1.2 million a year off the bottom line if it was fully implemented. My margins are still, an industry, like the industry, around 2 or 3%, getting back to there after fighting through the pandemic and after dealing with inflation and changing guest patterns also as a result of replay. There still hasn't totally recovered to people coming back in late at night and as often and that sort of thing. We still track the tips, so there's no more guessing about what people make. We report them to the IRS in Form 8027, and it shows that last year my servers on their charge sales made over 22% in tips. Charge sales are 90% of our total sales, and so that is a pretty representative number, I think. By the way, I did mention last year, I'm looking for somebody to sponsor a bill. When I get $1 on a charge for my server, the server gets $1. I get 97 cents. I'd like some help on that at some point. Greg still generates over $1.5 million in sales tax, and I think industry-wide we're up to $250 million. And again, that same thing. I get $1 in sales tax. I remit $1. I get paid 97 cents. So maybe that's an easier task than taking on the credit card companies. If we could get, it would still take 20% in business traffic to offset the elimination of the tipped wage. Or everybody says, well, cut hours. I'd have to cut 2/3 of my server hours just to be the same as I am today on expenses. And we're still talking about altering the compensation model of my highest earning group of employees. So, by the way, they're also the group that has the most influence over what they make. Good salesmanship and a good personality, they can make twice as much if someone isn't effective in those. What Rebecca was talking about. We've got more information now in places that did it. Washington, D.C., Maine, across the board. And we also have, I think somebody will talk about it, but we did a survey amongst and bartenders in Rhode Island, overwhelmingly against changing the compensation system. So I'd ask you that, well, for the sake of my business, but for the sake of the industry, to not pass this bill.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Thank you, Bob. Evie?
Hi. I, like Sarah, also work at Chomp Kitchen and Drinks. I work at the Providence location, and I've been there for almost 2 years.
Could you put the button up, please? Is it up?
It's, yeah.
A little closer. That's it.
Is that better? Okay. Yeah, so I've been at Chomp for almost 2 years, and I started that job right after I graduated from college, sort of intending for it just to be sort of a part-time thing until I could get a job within my industry. And I stayed because I figured that I was actually making a lot more hourly than I would have at an entry-level position for a job within I was majoring in college. I don't want to take up too much of your time because we're going to get very repetitive here, but I think the bottom line is that we didn't ask for this as servers, as bartenders. Yeah, we didn't ask for it. We didn't want the help. We're good as it is. Yeah.
Any questions of the witness? Evie, thank you for your testimony. Scott?
Hey, good evening, guys. I was here last year as well, so I think most of the points I had on my list have been hit, but me and my wife Adrian own 3 Diego's restaurants, kind of spread between Providence, Newport, and Middletown. Wharf Southern Kitchen, Wharf Fish House, and we've been in business since like 2009, just about. So a few points that haven't been hit. I mean, our hourlies are pretty similar here. Our houses are pooled. Everything goes into a check. It's probably a handful of times this year where we misjudge a snowstorm and the servers only made $13 an hour and it goes and we make up the difference, but that's only if there's a crazy event, but normally they're averaging around $30 an hour and it goes up. That's in February, so in the summer that goes up a lot higher. And that does maintain a level of service and hospitality in general. I know some of you guys, I lived in Australia for a while, and I came as a bartender from Boston and wanted to get right into the bar scene and quickly figured out it was a very different sort of position there. It was considered a crappy job. There was no tips, and when I went out with other people, because I was used to tipping and did anyway, they're like, what are you doing? They make $18 an hour, don't worry about it. So that's always terrified me of that happening here because the hospitality and the service was bad there, and that's kind of what our whole industry is fueled off. Like, I like going out and being waited on and having a great time and being sold a bottle of wine I never knew about. So I think that's part of the thing that gets missed in this argument. one question I asked a couple people going into this was like, hey, and maybe I'm just uneducated. All I know is the effect it would have on my business would be pretty devastating to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars in labor. But I asked, like, who am I missing that this is for? Is there a slew of dive bars that I don't know about that are paying cash and the server's only making $10? And if so, how do they keep them? Because if our servers and bartenders aren't making great money, they bounce pretty quickly, especially after COVID. We can't keep them. So it's not only, I couldn't see how that would be sustainable if there are bad employers not paying the difference. Or if there are bartenders making $15 an hour, they're generally leaving within a week. But I was told this is more of a national group that's funded by grants that pushes for this, and it has some base in potentially like a racial thing where maybe people aren't tipped properly based on their race at a certain restaurant. And that kind of blew my mind because that's not something I've ever experienced at all in any restaurant I've worked in the last 30 years, let alone the ones I've owned. If anything at Diego's, if someone happens to look Hispanic, they probably make a higher tip average because people trust them more than they might me. But so that was bizarre. That was the one I'm like, what? Because I'm like, we haven't heard server complaints, bartender complaints. No one wants it. People I know in other cities where it's gone into effect, their money tanks. So that was our biggest thing. I have the same numbers, but if I don't get why it keeps coming up and why we're wasting our time. Everyone's making good money. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Representative Fenton Fung.
Thank you, Chairman. I really appreciate you bringing up the overseas component. I used to live in Australia as well, and I used to live in the UK, and they don't have the professional level of service, of servers, barmaids, and whatnot as we do here. They don't, you say, I think your words were like, it's kind of a crappy job.
Yeah.
It's like, to them, it's like working at McDonald's, or just some fast food chain, because they're not invested in it. There's no incentive for them to come forward. And it is, Americans are so used to tipping and whatnot, and they kind of get insulted by it, and it's an awkward situation. You don't see the level of service that you do here, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's where this would head if a bill like this went into play, and was severely hurt, especially in the major cities like Newport, where I grew up. Definitely would hurt the culture of the town, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will have George Anderson and Courtney Perry from Georges of Galilee, and Anthony Pellegrino. Oh, that's correct. All right. It will take Kristen Cardinal from Cardinal Restaurant Group. Nope, she's not testifying either. Do we have Lynette Forey-Menard? Yes. All right. We shall begin with Jeff and Courtney. Jeff?
Hello, how's it going today? Well, first of all, thank you guys for all being here and listening to us on this matter. My name is Jeff Anderson. I've been working in restaurants in Southern Rhode Island since the day I turned 14. Waiting tables, bartending since I was 17. I've always wanted to bartend as a career, and the tip system is a big reason for that. Creating an amazing experience and being tipped accordingly to how well you do and the service that you provide. Tipping reflects the hospitality that you provide. I think eliminating tipping will decrease our income and turning this from a career into more of just a temporary job option for people. As you guys had already said, it's going to just turn into more of a fast food vibe, I believe. I've spoken to dozens of bartenders the last few days, and the reactions are all the same, just jaw-dropping and complete opposition to this. And these are the people that you need to listen to. Please do not pass this bill. As the saying goes, if it's not broke, please don't fix it.
Well, that was very good, to the point.
Thank you.
Courtney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm probably going to reiterate everything that everyone else has said. I started this job specifically 3 years ago. I used to work at the hospital. I got laid off at COVID. This job has given me an opportunity to make way more money than I was making working in the industry in the hospital for 20 years. I have the ability to make an insane amount of money simply by being personable and being on my A game and just treating people with respect. And I feel that if you pass this bill, that would change. It would turn into teenage kids who just need a job really quickly to say, and yeah, I just don't think it would be good for our economy. I don't think it would be good for Rhode Island. I think that a lot of people would move out of state simply because it's a bill that's not passed somewhere else. So please don't pass this bill.
Any questions? Thank you. Lynette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On behalf of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, we also respectfully oppose the passage of this bill. You've heard from all the experts. I'm just going to hit two quick highlights, just pointing out that the tipped wage is not the wage. It's not the only wage for an employee. You have to combine the tips together with the tipped wage to be able to determine what that employee's wage actually is. If in some world it doesn't add up to minimum wage, the employer then is responsible for making up the difference, and I think that's important. The other piece that the Chamber does not want to see happen is moving toward that European model where there is the higher wage, but there is no tipping. As someone, I think all of you know, does a lot of traveling, I can tell you the service is much, much better here in the good old United States than it is over in the European countries because they don't tip. So you're hearing everything else, Mr. Chairman. We are opposed and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of the witness? Thank you.
Thank you.
Grant Pilkington from the Rhode Island Business Coalition is against it, but does not wish to speak. Alan Krinsky, are you here from the Economic Progress Institute? We will now hear from the pro side. Mr. Krinsky, welcome to House Labor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the House Labor Committee. Feeling my testimony is not going to be so popular. I'm Director of Research at the Director of Research and Fiscal Policy at the Economic Policy Progress Institute, and I'm in support of Representative Felix's proposal. And I just want to point out at the beginning that this is not a proposal to change this tomorrow. It's to phase it in, going into effect 2030, so several years for businesses to adjust to this change. And I have written testimony. I will not repeat the data in that testimony. I will note that the poverty rate for tipped workers in the 7 or 8 states that have no difference between the tipped and the regular minimum wage is lower than in states that are adhering to the federal minimum wage. But so instead of repeating the data, I want to just reframe the issue for you. So although the tipped minimum may seem normal to most of us, I want you to imagine, what if we didn't have it? Would we then institute this as good policy? Would someone introduce a bill to introduce this? Now, these are, and for the professions that are covered by it, these are professions that are disproportionately held by women and Black and Brown Rhode Islanders. And it has its very history in slavery. I mean, and in the minimum wage in general, that when the minimum wage was established, there were certain groups that we have the tipped workers that were kept out of the minimum wage, and those are disproportionately occupations held by Black Americans and women of all races and ethnicities. And when it was created in 1938. And so if we would not enact this as good policy today, given the racism, and I think, I'm sure, the level of service is great. I think that, across the industry, I think the studies that have been done have failed to show a clear correlation between the level of service and quality of service and the amount of tips that are given, particularly along issues of the race of the server. So I don't think that this policy that was created almost a century ago based in sexual and racial discrimination is something that we would adopt today. If it's not good policy that we would adopt today, I'm not sure why we should continue it. I think that it makes sense to phase this out over several years, and in the states where they don't have it, the sky has not fallen. I think the evidence is mixed. In some places, tipping still goes on. In New York City, in particular, a few years ago, when the minimum wage was raised to $15, the restaurant industry was thriving. happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the witness? Thank you.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
I'm
Chairman.
sorry, Chair Casey.
So, thank you for your testimony. What problem are you solving by saying that this is something that would be good?
So, I mean, I think there are a number. I think that, some people certainly do really well. Not every worker in the industry does well. I think that in my written testimony has more about the sexual discrimination, but, women are often encouraged, to dress, differently to
Okay,
increase their level of, right? It would
Good.
solve, if workers didn't have to perform on that kind of way, it would, for their livelihood, that would solve some
I'm
of
going to
that.
disagree with you. I think it's about service. I think it's about good service. I go to a restaurant, and I've been to quite a few of the restaurants who have come up to testify, and I go for service. I go for good food, but I want to be treated well, and when I am, I always tip 20%, but when I'm treated really well, I tip more than that, because I think it's great for the server. I have a relationship with them. If I come back, I'm hoping to get that person to serve me again. I think it's an opportunity to create that relationship and that bond, and it's good for business when a person serves well. I don't think giving them a minimum wage and creating a situation where I don't have to tip, because there are people that they won't tip because that's just how they are, and I understand that. But this is about being able to serve. This is an occupation for people that they enjoy, and if somebody does industry, there's a problem somewhere. Either they're not that good of a server, or they're not that likable. I don't think that it's about being black, brown, or other. And so, I'm not seeing the problem. Just my opinion.
Representative Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Alan, I don't know if you have the information in front of you, but I'm curious, what are the areas, the places that you mentioned that no longer have a difference between minimum wage and tip minimum wage?
Right, there are 7 or I think it's now 8 states. I don't think I have the list of those states in front of me, but I can get that list to you.
Okay, thank you.
Second Vice Chair Alzate.
Thank you, Chairman. I think to my colleague's point is, yes, I give great service because I need I need and want a really great tip, right? However, but there's the other side of the coin, and like I said, my name is on this bill because of the other side, which is I have given great service and have gotten pennies as a tip, right? And so as servers, if it was really great service, and it's usually always on a really big bill, right? And it takes up so much more of your time. And so that's the frustrating part, right? And I think that's where the minimum wage conversations come in. Like if we just pay servers a minimum base wage, then we don't have to worry about the service and then not getting tipped and then making all these, stereotypical ideas of our customers or our guests, right? And so the idea that we're only going to get a good tip because we gave great service, or the opposite, what you believe is great service might not be great service to others, and so then you fall into a whole thing of, you're not making money, and is this worth it, blah, 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 right? And so for the servers in the room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It gets really hard. You're working 8, almost 10, 12-hour shifts on your feet, and you're not even making the base on your cash, right? You are making the minimum wage through hourly and all the laws that we have, but it's really hard to work that hard and then depend on if you think I gave you great service when I think I did give you great service, right? So, it's sticky in that way.
I would also add to that. I think that I would also add to that I think most of us don't work in tipped occupations, and I think most people try to do great jobs. And I think if we move to a point where we're paying everyone a living wage, and this is to be phased out, then people will still, I don't think people will stop doing quality work because of this. If we gradually move towards a living wage for people, then we won't have to necessarily be focused on pleasing customers in ways that encourage discrimination.
Any other questions? Thank you. Scott Kermel, did you sign up twice? Where is Scott? You didn't? Okay, so I have, it looks like Scott Kermel from Diego's also signed up. Do you have a twin with the same name? Perhaps. That ends the testimony for those individuals who wish to testify on the bill. We do have a number of people I'd like to read into the record who are opposed. And the following are all opposed to this bill. Lauren Schaefer from Mother Pizzeria, Sam Glynn from Chomp, Kerry, it looks like, could be Batista, Luigi's Restaurant and Gourmet, Stephen Davenport from Parkside, Harrison LK, Chow Fun Food Group, Lisa Darcy, Regan something, Colin Jeffrey from the G Hospitality, Kevin Durfee from Georges of Galilee, Joe DeQuattro, DeQuattro Restaurant Group, Jennifer Luxman from Sin, Damian Santoro from Ladder 133, Richard Mignanelli from Richard's Pub, and also Jim and Janice Mignanelli, Jack Waldron from Fresco Restaurants, is it Brian Woolley from Sykes Restaurant, Nicole Boudreau from Angelo's Pizza, Cindy DeJesus from, thank you, Tiffany from the same, David Smurley from Newport Hospitality Group, Brad Law from the Chandler, Ray Minius from the Chandler, Mark, don't know, from T's Restaurant, Candace Grennan from Angelo's, and Megan McGovern from Diego's. Those individuals were all signed up but did not wish to speak. They are in opposition. It's been a while since I've seen a bill that had such consistent opposition, regardless of the possible and alleged historical perspective of how the minimum wage was enacted originally many, many decades ago. But there does appear to be a pretty uniform consensus, at least for those individuals in this room who work in the business, against the bill. That terminates the testimony, hearing on 7531. We will now turn to Representative Morales. House Bill 7579.
Cleared up the room.
Was there something I said? House Bill 7579 by Representative Morales, an act relating to labor and labor relations, minimum wages, increases the state minimum wage by $1.25 per year from 2026 through 2029, when it would reach $20 per hour, and then provides for subsequent annual adjustments based on the Consumer Price Index. Representative Morales, welcome to House Labor, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. And Chairman, really do appreciate you being able to spell out the different stakeholders that were in opposition to the last bill around raising the tip minimum wage, because now I know what restaurants to refrain going to. On that note, I'm very proud to introduce House Bill 7579.
Respectfully, you're going to be hungry for a long time.
And on that note,
7579.
That is correct. So I'm proud to introduce House Bill 7579, as it is a piece of legislation that would support over 80,000 Rhode Islanders. Over 80,000 Rhode Islanders who earn the minimum wage. The minimum wage as it stands is currently $14 an hour, and it is projected to increase to $15 by next year. And then the following year, going into 2026, it would remain at $15. And this is why it is important that we are preparing to take action and ensure that our workers, folks who more often than not have to work more than one job because the minimum wage is insufficient, they should be able to have a level of reassurance that following an increased wage of $15, they could still depend on an increased wage going into the following year. So much so that we're able to establish a pathway to a $20 minimum wage by 2029, and thereafter adjust for inflation using the Consumer Price Index. Because as we have seen over recent years, the cost of living continues to escalate. It continues to escalate as it relates to housing, specifically for renters. And keep in mind, those earning minimum wage, more often than not, they're not homeowners. They don't have that privilege of being able to write their mortgage off their taxes. No, they are renters. They're folks who have to pay and oftentimes enter payment plans when it comes to their utilities. These are folks who more often than not have to struggle trying to get through the Department of Human Services to see if they qualify for Medicaid. In other words, people earning the minimum wage are often left struggling. And so it matters when our state government is able to have laws in place that guarantees that they're going to see an increase in their wage. And keeping in mind that our minimum wage, when you put it on an annual basis, doesn't even add up to $40,000 a year. And I know for a fact that if we were to think hard and look at our current salaries and then replace it with a sub-salary of $40,000 or less, we would be struggling. And I say that because I want to put us into their shoes. I want us to put us into the shoes of the working parents who are earning minimum wage. The young adult who is trying to live independently, trying to live off of the minimum wage. And for that reason, it is important that we pass this legislation, we have a plan in place following 2029, and then every year thereafter, there is some level of reassurance that there will be a continued increase in one's wages. That way, it gets a little easier when it comes to paying rent on a monthly basis. You're not struggling as much when you enter a payment plan with Rhode Island Energy trying to pay for your utilities. You could stock up a little more when you go to Aldi's trying to buy your groceries. And I say this as someone from lived experience who grew up to a single mom who had to work multiple jobs while earning the minimum wage. And as has been noted in countless studies and research, had wages kept up to pace with worker productivity, our wages would be $23 plus. Clearly, we're far from that reality. We have distanced ourselves from the notion that the minimum wage is a living wage. So at the bare minimum, we could at least ensure that we're at least making an effort to try to keep up with the rising cost of living and provide relief to the workers who need it most. Thank you.
Any questions of the witness? Representative Nadone.
Yeah, Rep. Morales, you said 80,000 people collect minimum wage?
Over 85,000, that is correct.
Do you know how many of them are like high school students or entry-level positions?
Less than 30% are under the age of 18.
Less than 30%, but...
Of those 85,000 people plus, yes.
How about entry-level positions?
Define entry level.
Somebody just new to the job market or new to the career.
Well, generally speaking, most jobs that are ever labeled as quote-unquote entry-level, regardless of industry, often defer to a lower wage. In certain cases, such as retail and the fast food industry, which I would still consider to be skilled labor, even though some folks may call it unskilled, yes, more than often, it is minimum wage.
And do you have a business?
Do I have a business? No, I do not, and I do not see the relevance to that question. I understand that we will likely get into
I'm trying to get an idea. If you have a
Representative Morales, respectfully, doesn't matter whether you see the relevance of that question.
I don't think it's...
The question's been asked.
It's not germane to the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think it is.
Myself being a business owner is not germane to the concept of whether or not we should have a decent wage.
No, but it does apply to the fact of whether or not you create a payroll and whether or not you understand the trials and tribulations of small businesses, respectfully.
Representative, continue. I apologize.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to insult you. I was trying to make a point here, and that was the way to get to my point, because when you hire a worker, it's based on their productivity level. And the higher you raise the pay, the less likely someone is going to take a chance on an employee, an entry-level employee, or say somebody who was incarcerated and got out of prison. So the unintended consequences of the higher you raise the wage, What it forces employers to do is to discriminate to those people that you're trying to help. Like, let's just say somebody is not very well educated, and they come in and they want $20 an hour. An employer is not going to take a risk on that employer because they're going to look at that employer and say, well, I can't pay him $20 an hour. I'm not in business to make charity. He's got to reach a certain amount productivity level. And if he hasn't been in the workforce, he's not well educated, he's not going to meet that productivity level. It's going to force me or whoever to discriminate against that person. And just this week, I've been looking for help. And I had a gentleman who called me who was incarcerated, and he wanted a job. And I had hired someone, and I said, let me see if the other person works out. If he doesn't work out, I'll consider you. But I am not going to I'm not going to take a risk on somebody who was incarcerated, comes out of prison, and now wants a job at $20 an hour or even $17 an hour. So I understand what you're doing and why you want to do it. There's these dynastic companies that have huge profits like Walmart and Home Depot, and you want to take a bigger chunk of their profits and divert it towards the worker. I get it. But the majority of businesses in Rhode Island are small businesses. They're not dynastic businesses. And what you're doing is you're making it more difficult for them. And not only that, but you're creating an atmosphere where they're forced to discriminate against the people that are less experienced or have some kind of baggage with them. That's all I'm saying, yeah.
I understand that point, Representative. And again, I'll just note, I don't think anyone should be entitled to earn a starvation wage, especially as the cost of living continues to increase.
No, but they are deserved the chance to get up on the ladder, on the first rung of the ladder, and prove themselves, and then work up to a wage that's comparable to their productivity level. This inhibits them. The higher you raise that wage, the bigger the barrier that comes out. And there's a lot of different ways people get paid. It's not only monetary. People they could get a flexible schedule, and they'd be willing to work for less. And that you inhibit that, the negotiations between two adults. So that's my point. Thank you.
Representative Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick comment, respectfully to my friend Representative Nardone. I would just say, I would remind the committee that we've passed a raise of the minimum wage very recently in Rhode Island, and we haven't seen the type of economic stifling that Representative Nardone is describing. The unemployment rate that we have in Rhode Island is 3.9. It's exactly the same that it is nationally. So respectfully, I think if that was so much of an inhibition on people taking chances on new employees, we would have realized some kind of discrepancy in comparison to the national standard. And secondly, I just wanted to say, Rep. Morales, thank you for putting the bill in. Certainly support it. The most important thing that I really like about this bill, in my opinion, is tying this to the consumer price index. I think that measure is really long overdue because, I think to the Representative Nardone's point about, whether any member of the legislature actually has real direct business experience, I don't think that we are really capable as a part-time legislature to be in here year after year saying this is what the minimum wage should be at this time, and then waiting for the political process to play itself out and then for that to go into effect. So whatever we do with the minimum wage, I feel that one component of tying this to the CPI, so future bodies here don't have to do this part-time work and try to be part-time economists, which is beyond our pay grade. We should set something, we should know it's a living standard for people, it's in statute, and then we don't have to continuously revisit it and have these same conversations and debates. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Potter. Second Vice Chair Elzati.
Thank you. For me, it's more of a comment. Something that I think we fail to think about when a lot of these bills come up is, we've been hit hard for a long time. This has nothing to do with what we've passed, $15 minimum wage, or even in this bill. But I think that the points that we all can agree on is that life is very expensive right now. And the current federal minimum wage is still $7.25, right? And while other states are doing their due diligence of upping it, and we understand that we definitely don't want to hit our small businesses, something that we really have to think about is we're humans first. And right now, where people are getting paid, whether they're entry level or even highly educated like myself, we're not making the money that we need to be making in order to live, right? And so while I understand both points on both my colleagues, I commend both of you because they're both really important points. But at the end of the day, we still have to show up for our communities and make sure that our working class families who are working, whether they're going to college or they're going into a trade or they're working, at the movie theaters, that we are still able to they are still able to pay rent, live a fun life, provide for their kids and their families. And while of course I want to raise the minimum wage, I still don't think $20 is enough. And I think studies have shown that it's not, but that's a whole thing. We're human first, and we need to make sure that just like everything is increasing, we have to take a real hard look at ourselves and at businesses to make sure that what we are paying people is fair. However, whatever side that you're on is fair. So just, something to think about. I understand that these bills they're hard. They're hard on both ends. But, people need to live, and we're not creating spaces or places for them in order to work and to have a livable wage, if you will, on whatever side that you're on. So something to think about.
Representative Nardone, are you going to ask a question? Because I don't want to get into a debate.
Yeah, I understand that. And I would ask a question to Rep. Morales, but very quick. Would you say that compensation comes in different forms than monetarily?
I think whenever one is working an occupation on a part-time or full-time basis, the main level of compensation is ultimately going to be one that is monetary. So in other words, folks are looking at what their hourly wage and how that equates to an annual salary.
All right, so would you say that if somebody works, say, for a carpet installer, a carpenter or something, and the knowledge they gain, would you say that has value to it? Because I know in Europe that parents pay mechanics and other people just to teach their children trades. So would you say that has some value?
I can't buy groceries with knowing how to
No,
do
but you can move up to that. You can move up the ladder, and you were able to facilitate more funds, maybe a year, 2 years down the road, where you will be able to buy groceries. I'm not saying it's not easy to work on minimum wage, but minimum wage is just not the whole picture. The wage is not the whole picture of the employment. There's much more to it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Representative Morales. Christopher Carlozzi had been here earlier testifying on another bill, and he already expressed his opposition to this bill. He was representing the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Peggy DeJalis from the United Way, welcome to House Labor. The button up?
It is. Thank you so much. Deja Lay. Thank you, Speaker. Chair. I am speaking today in representation of my employer, the United Way of Rhode Island, as well as the membership of the Workforce Alliance. Briefly, the Workforce Alliance is a collaboration of adult education professionals, workplace development, educators, and folks trying to get folks good jobs. These are the people immediately viewing the results of higher wages and the impact that higher wages have on the folks that are presently earning at or less than the state's minimum wage. We'll start with United Way. That was my first thing today. 211 United Way of Rhode Island Social Service Referral Network receives calls for help from Rhode Islanders every day who are struggling to make ends meet and are now requesting assistance from the nonprofits in our state for assistance paying for housing and food. Rhode Island nonprofits are working hard to meet those needs, but it's imperative to support individuals and families before they reach that crisis point. Raising wages as detailed in 7579 is a crucial step towards economic empowerment for the members of our community most in need of stability. Raising the minimum wage is an issue of equity. Minimum wage jobs are disproportionately worked by women and people of color. Consider the industries that benefit from paying their employees the least: childcare, retail, food service, hospitality, cleaning, agriculture. These industries employ who pay for housing and food, not primarily teens living with their parents like the stereotype suggests. That's false. When Rhode Island raises the minimum wage this year and schedules increases in future years, I'll be proud that we have demonstrated our commitment to fairness, equity, and economic prosperity for all of my neighbors. Please consider United Way of Rhode Island, as well as the Workforce Alliance, in full support of House Bill 7579 in your deliberation. I'll accept questions.
Any questions of the witness?
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Lynette Forey-Menard for the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce. You just made it under the wire, huh?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm running between here and Judiciary upstairs. On behalf of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, we do respectfully oppose this bill. Every year since 2020, we've been raising this minimum wage, and this bill before you proposes to increase it between 7% and 8% every year until we get to 2030, and then the Consumer Price Index increase thereafter. One of the things I want to point out is that this is much more than just minimum wage. Every time the wage goes up, workers' comp premiums go up for employers, unemployment insurance taxes go up for employers, FICA goes up for employers. So it's something that can't be looked at in a vacuum and say, this is the only difficulty employers are going to face. It's much more than that. For those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we would oppose this legislation. We'd like to take a breath after all of these increases and regroup.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Representative Nardone.
You know what percentage of businesses are small businesses in Rhode Island? Would you know that off the top of your head, or you wouldn't know that?
I don't know the percentage. I know it's the majority.
I know that, too. I just was like, is it in the 80s, do you know?
I'd really be guessing.
I think it's about 85, but...
It would be my guess,
Yeah,
but
okay, all right,
it
that's
might
it.
even be 90s, but
Yeah,
it's
I was
high.
hoping that you would know that number off the top of your head. But
Can you get that information for us, Lynette?
I will, and it also does depend on what you consider a small business, but I will get those numbers for
The
you.
definition in Rhode Island, I believe, is under 100 employees. So, all right, thanks.
Thank you. And Nina Harrison from the Economic Progress Institute. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Corvesi. Thank you for having me back. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Nina Harrison. I'm the Policy Director at the Economic Progress Institute. I do appreciate what this committee and the General Assembly has done to raise the minimum wage over the last few years. However, as many of you are aware, many Rhode Islanders continue to struggle, and wages have not been keeping up with the cost of housing or food. In 2022, the Economic Progress Institute released its Rhode Island Standard of Need report, which will be releasing another report later this year, showing that 61% of single adults in Rhode Island could not afford to meet their basic needs, and 70% of single parents with 2 children could not meet their basic needs. And these numbers were worse when you account for gender and race. As Peggy mentioned, this is an equity issue because women, especially, and women of color tend to disproportionately work in these lower wage jobs. And so these are communities that are already experiencing disparity in outcomes across the board, in education, in healthcare, in wealth and income. And so this is just another area that this harm is compounded, that this committee and this General Assembly could do something about by raising the minimum wage. Also, at a time when I know that general revenue funds are scarce, this is a really meaningful way that the General Assembly could really improve the lives of so many Rhode Islanders without having to spend general revenue funds. I am empathetic to the cause of small business people and having to, make their costs in order to keep their business running. But I do have to ask, how many hours a week does this committee and does the General Assembly expect people to work in order to be able to afford their rent and groceries? 40 hours a week is not enough. We know that. So how many hours a week does this committee think is acceptable for Rhode Island workers to be working in order to just make ends meet, in order to just be able to cover their basic necessities, not have a meal at McDonald's, not take their family to the park and ride the carousel at Roger Williams Park? But is 60 hours a week how much people should be having to work in order to just get by? The Rhode Island Standard of Need report that I cited is 2 years old at this point, but the Massachusetts Institute of Technology does calculate the living wage for each state, and they are calculating that currently the living wage for a single Rhode Islander is $24 an hour and 24 cents. And that's up from $17.80 in 2022, which I expect is adjusted for the inflation and cost increases that we have seen, including the rent increases in Providence, which last year, you may know, were the highest of any rent increases of any city in the country. And also, Providence has a much higher Black and Latino population than the rest of Rhode Island. So again, this is Black and Latino people disproportionately bearing this burden of increased rental costs and disproportionately working these lower wage essential jobs that we acknowledged just a few years ago that the state could not function without during COVID. And finally, I'd just like to highlight some of the holistic ways that this bill relates to everything else that you all are working on and everything else that matters to Rhode Islanders. People can't afford childcare right now. To increase childcare, the CCAP program eligibility, that costs money from the state. So I hope that you can do that too, but if you can't, I hope that you can raise the minimum wage because people need childcare and so do businesses. Small businesses fail if there is no one to watch people's children. Workers drop out of the workforce if there's no one to watch their children. When a mother has her second child, it will cost her more to put those two children in daycare than she can make at work, she's going to leave the workforce. And so some of these workforce crises that we've seen in childcare, in elder care, really tough jobs, are not really because people don't want to work or because there's a shortage of qualified people. There are qualified people who want to work, but not if it means they're going to break even or at a loss after paying for childcare. So what we're seeing is workforce exodus. And so I hope that you as a committee and as a General Assembly can work to avert this crisis, to mitigate it, and to ensure that these crises don't grow even bigger to the point where they do cripple the economy or leave our elders in serious jeopardy because there's not enough people to care for them. We urge passage. Thank you.
Any questions? I have one. So in your testimony, you said the present, was it the average minimum wage is $24 and change?
Not average, but what the Massachusetts Institute of Technology suggests is the living wage for a single person in Rhode Island. And I have a site that's also in my...
It was $24 and change.
Yes, $24.24 for a single person and $42.87 for a single person with one child.
Let's take the single for the sake of discussion. 24 and change, according to MIT's study. You have that study if we need it?
Yes, it's cited in the written testimony that I submitted.
Great. That was for 2024?
Correct.
You said in 2022 was $17 and change.
Correct.
Maybe my math is off. That's about 40% increase over 2 years.
My math, I'm sure, is worse than yours, so I'll take your word for it.
Let's say it's, okay. Maybe a little less than that. That seems to be a significant increase over a short period of time. Does the MIT study determine what the factors were to raise it so high within 2 years?
That's something I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure that
Because
in digging into the study, I could find that.
That is, I think, would be a significant. I think would be significant from the standpoint of what is driving the cost of living up for the need of that wage, and what policies have been placed, what policies have been put into effect over the last several years that may have pushed that.
Well,
because what we don't want to see is a inflationary cycle feeding onto itself. I'm not saying that this bill would do that. I'm just curious, seeing as how It went up from 17 to 24, $7, okay, which is significant over a 2-year period. If it was a 10-year period, I could understand it. But over a 2-year period, did MIT, I'd be interested to know if MIT came up with reasoning why it was raised and what policies, if any, were promulgated or differences in the economic structure in the state that would have fueled such an increase.
Sure, I would be happy to look into that. And I hypothesize that, again, a large part of it would be the chart-topping rent increase for Providence, as well as the nationally noted increased price of groceries.
And then you'd have to ask what fueled those.
And I can answer that partially. In Providence, and in the state in general, there's an extreme shortage of affordable housing and housing stock in general. And I know that that's something that the Speaker and this General Assembly are trying to address, and I thank you for that. And I know that housing can't be built overnight, but in the absence of any sort of rent control at the municipal or state level that exists in other states, there is no limit to what people can charge in a supply and demand market. And so we really saw that in Providence, and we saw the people being hit hard by it. And also, in terms of the grocery prices, I'm no international expert. I've seen people and publications theorize about the war in Ukraine and things like that affecting food production, but also citing historic profits for the main food companies. And so I think that's a combination of policies as well. It's a combination of the international reality that affects food production, but also maybe corporations taking advantage of that and having record profits as a result.
I think it would be interesting to try to determine the variables affecting that.
I agree.
But thank you for your testimony. Any questions? No. Mr. Goldberg, you are last on this bill.
Bob Goldberg again for the Chamber. Mr. Chairman, let me first emphasize I do appreciate the lateness of the hour, and due to that I have two very brief points I'd like to make. Number one, the suggestion that the increase minimum wage according to the schedule in this is going to solve a lot of problems. I would suggest there are so many variables, and it's such a complex problem that it's not nearly as simple as a mere increase in the minimum wage. The second point I'd like to make is my personal major objection to this legislation is how it attempts to tie the hands of future General Assemblies. Once this bill was passed, if this bill were passed as it was, there'd be riots in the street if you tried to lower it to adjust to economic problems in the future. Nobody has a crystal ball. Everybody wants a guarantee. There's no guarantees, believe me. My short time in this world, I found there are none whatsoever. But for those two reasons and more business-related reasons, on behalf of the Greater Providence Chamber, I'm here to object to this.
Bob, the committee respects your opinion, as they do everyone who testifies. I understand your perspective on that. I doubt very much there'd be riots in the streets, but I will say this. I don't believe any future legislature can be tied by any act of the present legislature, because with a stroke of the pen, we can undo it.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done, but it can be done, and it has been done. So I appreciate your testimony. Thank you. Any questions of the witness? No. That ends the verbal testimony for 7579. In addition, there are a number of people who signed up who did not want to speak. Specifically, Scott Bromberg, Rhode Island Food Dealers Association, who was against it. Peter Brennan from the New England Convenience Stores was against it. Grant Pilkington, representing the Rhode Island Business Coalition. Bill Walsh from the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. So that ends the testimony on 7579. We will move now to Representative Sanchez's bills. 7172, 7883. First one, 7172, regarding minimum wages, repeals the law that allowed employers to pay some of their minor employees and employees who are full-time students and not attained the age of 19, less than minimum hourly wages, requiring them to be paid a minimum hourly wage. And 7883, the Nick Ajamand No Weight Discrimination Act. Creates the Nick Ajamand No Weight Discrimination Act. The purpose of this act would be to prohibit weight discrimination. Representative Sanchez, welcome to House Labor. You can take them in whatever order you wish.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the Labor Committee. Just want to respectfully ask Chairman Corvese if I should just start getting used to being last every single time when there's a Labor Committee hearing. It's been like this since last year, Chairman. The most respectful question.
And it is a respectful question.
Yeah.
And I don't have a crystal ball.
Okay. No, I'm just saying. Anyways, all right. Thank you. No, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, members of this committee, for listening to these pieces of legislation. I'm going to start out with the Labor and Relations Minimum Wages Act. I'm here again to testify in support of this important piece of legislation that would repeal the law that would allow for employers to pay their employees who are under the age of 19 and full-time students the less than minimum hourly wages. This results would repeal that all minors and all full-time students be paid the minimum hourly wage, which is now $14, and for next year, $15. I think with the ongoing cost of living expenses, our young people also have higher expenses and higher cost of living, and on top of that, they have to pay for their education as well. For those who choose to go to school or attend a post-secondary institution, I think it's only fair that we make sure that those young folks are getting taken care of economically as well. They deserve livable wages. They deserve getting paid a wage that is going to, pay their expenses. I know of many youth who have been struggling to help pay for expenses at home. I know that young people also contribute to the household by paying certain bills, electricity rates, or contributing to the rent or even to the mortgage. And so I think, since I know there are some exemptions here for a lot of companies and some corporations and nonprofits as well that are exempt in the state of Rhode Island, and it's they don't require to pay their young people or full-time students or young people under the age of 19 the minimum wage. So if we're giving money out to nonprofits, or if nonprofits are trying to hire people or young people for positions and pay them already low wages, they should be at least paying them the full minimum wage. But anyways, I don't want to take up too much time on this bill and just want to answer any questions or any concerns.
Before you move on, any questions of the witness on this bill? First Vice Chair Messier.
Rep, is this for the same hours worked and the same type of work?
Yes, correct.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The only person who signed up against it but not want to speak was Christopher Carlozzi from the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Representative Morales, we will turn to 7883.
Representative Sanchez.
I'm sorry.
That's
what
my
did I
vote.
say? Representative Sanchez.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee for hearing this important piece of legislation. Honestly, if I'm going to have a piece of legislation passed this year, I think it's going to be this one because there's been a large ongoing coalition of folks who've reached out, have submitted testimony, have shown up to testify today as well. Any sort of discrimination towards a human being is already inhumane and unjust. And I think when it comes to employers and employees, we want to make sure that all fairness, all sides of the parties are meeting their requirements. And I came up with this legislation because I started doing some research into some of the health and safety concerns and conditions that employees have expressed concerns about, have expressed disappointments towards their employers, who a lot of times, without even knowing it, discriminate against certain employees for reasons of obesity, for reasons of overweight, of how they look like, of how much they weigh. There are already some laws, some states that outlaw this act, that already prohibits employers from determining employees' positions based off how much they weigh. I've spoken to several individuals who have told me that oftentimes they see themselves being targeted by employers because they go into an interview, they are met with pushback on their ability to drive there, their ability to walk, or determining a transportation reason, and people have told me straight up that they have issues with their employers. They have issues with the interview because they often feel that they're being subjected to some sort of discrimination. But anyways, I don't want to take too much time on this piece of legislation. I know some folks are here to testify. I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions of the witness? Thank you. Steve Brown from the ACLU.
Thank you again, Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Brown on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island in support of this legislation. You've heard the reason for it from the sponsor. We have a particular interest and actually knowledge of this issue. We handled the first lawsuit in the country almost 30 years ago on behalf of an individual who was not rehired by the state solely because of her obesity. And the state made no bones about it, that was the reason she was not rehired. We filed a lawsuit on her behalf and argued that it violated federal anti-discrimination laws, particularly a federal law that bans discrimination on the basis of disability or perceived disability. And the federal courts agreed that she had been unlawfully discriminated against on that basis. There's no direct similar provision in state law, and we believe it would be appropriate to do that. I would note that if this bill were to be favorably considered, it does need amending its own section. We believe it should appear in the Fair Employment Practices Act and the Fair Housing Act rather than on its own, so that the Human Rights Commission would be able to enforce it the same as it does all the other anti-discrimination laws. But with those revisions, we think that it's an appropriate and proper addition to our anti-discrimination laws in Rhode Island. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Emily Tessier. Welcome to House Labor, Emily.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee. Thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Emily Tessier. I am a town councilor down in Middletown, but today I am here simply as a Rhode Island resident. I am a registered dietitian. I fully support this bill. So as a dietitian, I specialize in eating disorders, body image, and weight-neutral care. And I can attest to the absolute significant harm that weight discrimination and anti-fat bias has, both on an individual level and on more of a systemic level on folks in larger bodies. It really is an issue, including in the workplace. So for example, multiple peer-reviewed studies do show or have shown that folks in larger bodies get paid less than their smaller bodied counterparts, even when their merits and performance are similar or the same. Additionally, when someone does experience discrimination based on the size of their body, it does put them at a much greater risk for things like eating disorders, depression, anxiety, and other health issues, which are the things that I then specialize in. So I hear about these issues all of the time. I'd also like to point out that pretty disturbingly, when you look at the origins of where this anti-fat bias, this weight discrimination really has come from, because this hasn't been forever, this unfortunately does have racist roots. I'm not going to get into that tonight unless you'd like me to, but it's pretty unfortunate, and I did want to bring that up. I believe that this is a very common sense bill. I think this definitely needs to be passed, and it will create a more equitable environment in the workplace here in Rhode Island. And I'm absolutely happy to answer any questions that you have.
So you're maintaining that the bias in weight discrimination has a origin in racial discrimination?
Yes, yes. So, yes, weight discrimination and anti-fat bias has roots in racism. Yes, yes. There's, if you're interested, there's a book called Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Dr. Sabrina Strings. It is a pretty academic book, and it was hard for me to get through because it's really academic, but I highly encourage it. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We had one other individual who had signed up not to testify, but supporting the bill, Elizabeth, and I know I do not read the writing. Pretty good with first names, not too good with last names. Stenhauer. And that concludes testimony in 7883. We will now turn to Representative Shanley's bill, 7788. Representative Shanley is not here. This is regarding minimum wages, creates new definition for the term employee for purposes of wages, workers' compensation, temporary disability, and unemployment insurance benefits, which deems a worker to be an employee as opposed to an independent contractor. We have a few people here. I'm going to ask Alan Krinsky to come up, because he is for the bill, so you can explain the necessity for this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just again for the record, I'm Alan Krinsky, Director of Research and Fiscal Policy at the Economic Progress Institute. And before getting this bill, I just want to share one quick point on Rep. Morales' bill, which is that Connecticut already has the inflation adjustment on their minimum wage, so they're at like $15.69 or something. Massachusetts is at 15 already, meaning Rhode Island minimum wage workers, say in the fast food business, can just cross the border to get paid more to do the exact same job. On 7788, which we support, there are two issues. One is the case where, and this may be related to the bill, your bill earlier, cases where employers who are actually, I guess cheating might be the word, and DLT does audits every year to crack down on this. So for example, in 2022, they identified 949 misclassified workers with $10.3 million in underreported wages and $339,000 assessed in tax, interest, and penalties. You have sort of employers who are, not most employers, but some who are doing that, who are treating employees as independent contractors. Then we have the case of the so-called gig workers, like your Uber and Lyft drivers, who, according to any sort of common sense definition, which is what this bill does, are really employees, but they're treated like independent contractors. And both of these are problems in three ways. One, workers who really are employees are deprived of important protections and benefits that other workers get, including things like access to the state's paid leave system. Employers who don't follow the rules are an unfair competitive advantage, and then the state loses out on income tax, and the unemployment system loses out on payroll taxes. So what this legislation would do is bring Rhode Island into alignment with many other states by encoding in state law what's known as the ABC test. And what the ABC test does is it asks 3 questions to determine, is someone an independent contractor or are they an employee? And so, is the work done without direction and control of the employer? Is the work performed outside the usual course of the employer's business? And is work done by someone who has their own independent business? If you answer yes to any one of those, then you're an independent contractor. But if not, or actually if you answer no to any one of those, then we really have an employee. And so you can think about, I think about the example that, my organization, we sometimes print reports, and we go to a printing business, and we share the file for them to print, but we don't tell them when and how to do their job. It's not part of our usual business that we do printing, and there's someone who has an independent business. We're contracting with them. But if you look at someone who's like an Uber or Lyft driver, it's not that kind of situation. For Uber or Lyft, these individuals they're telling these individuals what to do and when to do it, basically. I mean, they may have some choice in the matter, but they're telling them what the work is. That is their business, to provide rides. And these individuals are not really operating an independent business. So what this legislation would do would institute this test and make it clear who employees are. I think we could also call it sort of, the duck test. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I think we know what employees are, and this legislation would make that the case. And I would just close by saying that many states have versions of this, not this exact setup, but have versions of the ABC test. And you would have to go, to get to the next state that does not have some form of this from Rhode Island, you have to go to Virginia or Ohio. All the states between here and those states have some version of this in their state statute. So I would encourage you to pass this legislation and protect Rhode Island employees. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. I'll call up Bob Goldberg and Lynette Forey-Menard, both of whom are in opposition to this bill.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to?
Ladies first.
I am here on behalf of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce and on behalf of myself to oppose this language as it's written. I think Bob will probably get into last year a little bit, so I'll focus just on this ABC test. It is a little different than what it was described to you. It is a 3-prong test, often called the ABC test, but you have to meet all 3 prongs. The test says the person has to be free from control, which is a normal test when you're looking at independent contractors. The second piece says the person performs work that is outside the normal course of business. That's a key. That is one that's very difficult to meet. And then third, and it is an and, it's not an or, the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade. It is really, really difficult for an individual to meet all 3 of those prongs. I am a woman-owned business. I think I'm certified in Rhode Island. I did that this year. I am an independent contractor. Every one of my clients has government affairs as a normal part of their ordinary working world. So if this passed, I would have to be an employee for every one of my clients. They would have to have workers' comp for me. They would have to have unemployment comp, and so on and so forth. So the example I always say in the last few years when I've been testifying is if I'm here testifying on behalf of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber, and by the way, the Realtors Association opposes, if I get up and fall, which one do I go to for workers' comp? It would be crazy. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, and we support what you did last year to try to further clarify independent contractors, we do oppose the bill.
Thank you. Any questions? Bob?
Once again, Mr. Chairman and member of the committee, I'm here on behalf of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and as I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, you recall, the Chamber was very, very involved in the 2-year-long discussion concerning independent contractor and employee. That was at the core of what the unions call wage theft and misclassification, et cetera, et cetera. And after 2-year discussion, working through, et cetera, the Fair Labor Standards Act was adopted by this assembly as a test between an independent contractor and employee. And part of the reasoning for that is what the proponents of the IRS test is what this is proposing. The proponents of that were primarily the unions, organized labor, and the business community was on the other side of that. And certainly the more employees they have, the better they are off in their particular business. There was a compromise in that bill, I'm sure you recall, where the construction industries, that was the flag that they all flew under, and so they were carved out. But clearly the Assembly chose the Fair Labor Standards Act to determine the test so as not to totally upset the whole business community in Rhode Island. We just heard all these bills about people wanting to get ahead and fair way and all of that. Well, one of the most primary ways that businesses are started, people get ahead, they start with a little side business, which grows into a full-time job, et cetera, et cetera. Initially, it supplements their income. They get better and better. Then it's taken over their business world, and that's been the seed area for so much commerce in Rhode Island and elsewhere, which is probably why and I don't speak for the Assembly, but probably why the Assembly adopted the Fair Labor Standards Test. And this bill totally reverses it in those two little paragraphs in the bill of the new language, which is the, quote, three-prong IRS test, which is impossible, as Lynette just described, for anybody to meet. And I would ask that the Assembly this year continue to see the fruits of their labor for the last 2 years, see how it works out, see what happens and what develops, not to very subtly erase it all in one small piece of legislation. For those reasons, the Chamber opposes it.
Thank you. Any questions? So the following individuals, all of which signed up against, did not want to testify. Christopher Carlozzi. Christopher Carlozzi? You put the no column. Come on up. I will say one thing to dovetail on what Mr. Goldberg said. I find it unusual that on this bill, the unions have not weighed in one way or the other. They have not weighed in, unless they sent a letter that I'm not aware of. There may be one. Okay. Mr. Cup. You. It's an interesting, is an interesting absence. Mr. Carlozzi, my apologies. But you did mock the no.
That is my fault, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Not a problem. Welcome back.
I am the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business, as stated earlier. In Rhode Island, we represent hundreds of small and independent business owners, including self-employed individuals, as well as the businesses that contract with them, freelancers like computer support, landscapers, painters, photographers, electricians, mechanics. On behalf of those self-employed individuals and those that utilize their services, we oppose this bill. You could probably tell from my accent, but aside from NFIB's Rhode Island director, I serve as our Massachusetts state director as well. And this bill operates very similarly to how Massachusetts independent contractor law works, which means a complicated test where it essentially makes it impossible to be considered self-employed. The history of the Massachusetts law started in 2004, where the definition was altered, that very important "and" we heard about earlier. When attempting to make the Massachusetts law more understandable, it has led to more confusion. At one point, the Massachusetts legislature wrote a law that, along with the then Attorney General's advisory opinion interpreting the law, has left many traditional employer-self-employed relationships in further doubt. It led to some people being employees, according to some state agencies, while remaining independent contractors in the eye of other state agencies and federal authorities. Even after seeking professional advice from lawyers, accountants, small business owners still can't be completely certain of avoiding significant financial penalties because of misclassification. In addition, out-of-state employers would prefer to hire independent contractors from other states than risk violating the outlier Massachusetts law. This is not something Rhode Island should want to emulate, where the only thing keeping legitimate self-employed individuals from being considered employees is selective enforcement. According to a 2013 study conducted by New Jobs for Massachusetts, the Massachusetts independent contractor law was estimated to suppress over 43,000 jobs from being created within a decade of enactment, which we've seen. Rhode Island should want to encourage job growth, including jobs for those seeking to be self-employed. Rhode Island already made national news last summer with some recent changes. We strongly urge you to reject House Bill 7788 as an extremely restrictive proposal that will impact the Rhode Island economy and more specifically small businesses.
Thank you. Any questions? The clerk has informed me that we do not have any letters from any unions, pro or con, regarding this piece of legislation. To continue, those individuals I'm going to mention signed up against did not want to speak. Christina Kennedy from DoorDash, Grant Pilkington, Rhode Island Business Coalition, Ernie Shakalian, the Independent Insurance Agents, Bill Walsh, Rhode Island Builders and Rhode Island Hospitality, Steve Wright, Now Delivery, Phil Tedesco, Rhode Island Realtors Association, Will Farrell from Uber, and Eugene Nadeau from NAIFA. That ends the testimony on 7788. We will now turn our attentions to the last bill of the evening, Bill 8059 by Chair Baginski, an act relating to labor and labor relations, Rhode Island Non-Competition Agreement Act. Prohibits non-compete agreements except for non-compete agreements between a seller and a buyer of a business. Creates civil action for an employer for the violation of an agreement by employee regarding disclosure or wrongful utilization of trade secrets. The only person signed up to speak is Bob Goldberg. Bob, would you like to come up? And you're representing the Providence Chamber.
Yes, Mr. Chamber, thank you. On behalf of the Chamber, we oppose this legislation as a non-compete agreement, as they're called, has been a tool in the business community where sensitive data is transferred to employees, and frequently very expensive training is given to the employees with the expectation that they will stay, and it will be a good deal for both the employer and the employer and employee. I will tell you that the courts nationwide, and especially in Rhode Island, are very strict on what they allow in a non-compete agreement. It's not nearly as one-sided as some people would suggest to you. They have to be very limited geographic area, very short period of time. I don't think off the top of my head that they're allowed for any more than 1 year in the state of Rhode Island, and frequently the courts would rule less. And there has to be a rational basis and reason for the agreement. This statute would just wipe that out and outlaw them across the board, except in the sale of the business. For those reasons, this passage of this bill would inhibit the ability of businesses in Rhode Island to attract out-of-state talent, expertise, and things of that nature that make the economy run. And for those reasons, the Chamber opposes this.
Thank you. Any questions? That ends the verbal testimony on 8059. There are 3 individuals who'd signed up. Lynette Forey-Menard, Rhode Island Mortgage Bankers Association against, Alan Krinsky, Economic Progress Institute for, and Will Farrell, Rhode Island Bankers Association against. That ends testimony in 8059. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Seconded by the chairman. All those in favor? Aye. Aye.